It's the end of 2023 and these final days of the year are always a chance for me to look back and reflect. And as reading is such a big part of my life, books are of course part of that. So I wanted to share with you today my 2023 reading wrap up, the highlights of my reading this year. I definitely didn't read as much this year as I would in previous years. I read 30 books, which probably would have disappointed me at one point when I was reading hundreds of books a year, but I'm really pleased with that this year because there were months where I didn't read anything at all and months where I read a lot. But the most important thing, of course, was that I enjoyed the majority of what I read. So 2023 has definitely been about quality over quantity. I'm going to share with you my reading highlights of the year, so hopefully you'll be inspired to pick up some of these books next year. They include classics, which I talk about most often on my channel, but I've also got other genres and other authors in this list. So a very varied reading list. Let's get into it. Do share with me in the comments what your favourite books of 2023 have been, so you can inspire me in turn for my reading list in 2024. So anyone who knows me just a little, who has watched any of my videos, might know that I am not the biggest of crime fans. I've actively made a point that I don't like reading crime. It is not a genre for me. Well, that was up until this year. This year was my year of Agatha Christie. Yes, I am in love, everybody. I'm in love with a woman called Agatha Christie, who has no idea who I am on account of the fact that she's been dead for a long time, but I am obsessed with her books. The obsession has reached new heights. I live and breathe Agatha Christie now, and I have no regrets. I'm loving this so much. So I set myself the goal this year of reading something of Agatha Christie's because I dipped my toes into the crime pond last year. I read some Dorothy L. Sayers for the first time and really enjoyed that. So I thought I'm going to read some more crime, and Golden Age crime is definitely my thing. I like my crime to feel like I am in an old country house in a party where somebody's going to die. I want every crime book I read to feel a little bit like that. I don't love new stuff, but I do think I'll try some more modern crime in 2024. I remembered about halfway through this year that I was going to read some Agatha Christie, that I'd said in my classics I want to read in 2023 video that finally this was going to be my year that I at least tried Agatha Christie. What I didn't expect was that I was going to be hooked from the very first book. So I've read 5 Agatha Christie books in total this year, including one of the books she wrote under her pen name Mary Westmacott, and out of those 5, these are my highlights and where I would recommend starting. So I started by reading Murder on the Orient Express, which is one of her Poirot detective novels. I've known about Poirot, I've seen him in popular culture. I have not watched any adaptations, but I know the character. He is a Belgian refugee. You sort of see him twiddling his moustache, he's very sort of analytical, but I didn't think that I would love this so much, not just because of the characters, but because of the actual reading experience itself. I have found with Agatha Christie that her books so much are about the crime and the setting outside of the characters. I like Poirot, he annoys me. I do think that Miss Marple could take him on in a fight and win, like a physical fight even. I just think she's craftier. But I loved this because of the setting of the Orient Express and how that added to the crime that had taken place. I liked the psychology of it. So it's not so much about me relating to the characters, but it's as I'm reading it, I can put myself in the detective's shoes. I feel like Poirot's assistant as I'm reading it, and I am trying to solve the murder at the same time as him. As my first Agatha Christie book, the thing that surprised me was how readable this is. I read it in basically a day because I could not put it down. I just sped through it and kept reading, and the rest of the world melted away. I had to find out what happened, and I had to know if I was right or not. So it was a great place to start. I've been reading the Poirot novels out of order, and that's worked really well. I don't think you have to read them in order. So I do think that if you haven't read any Agatha Christie, you can't really go wrong with Murder on the Orient Express. After that, I read what has been my favourite Agatha Christie book so far, which is And Then There Were None. This is a standalone mystery, so there's no specific detective involved. This is about 10 strangers who are invited to an island, and they don't know why they've been invited or who specifically has invited them and for what purpose, but they're all here, and then one by one they suddenly start dying. And the way in which they start dying is according to this old rhyme. So they can basically predict how a murder is going to happen, but they don't know which one of them will be next. And because they are on this remote island, and because there is a definite pattern to these things happening, they know that one of them is likely the murderer. I thought this was so cleverly crafted because as the people keep dying, as these characters keep getting bumped off and you don't know which one will be next, you know that they're going to die, but you start to get closer to them. I started to like them as people. I started to relate to them a bit. And I started to think, hopefully this will not happen. Hopefully this will be wrong. Hopefully one of them will solve this before they keep dying. The characters who lived the longest were definitely the ones that I liked the most as characters. Not always because they were the nicest people, but because you had more time with them to build up their complexity as people. So again, it's very much about the psychology behind the people, behind the victims, behind the potential murderer. I loved it, and again, sped through it in a day. I think I read this in less than 24 hours. I sort of ignored all the work I had to do and was like, just gonna read this instead, and it was worth it. It really was. I also have to give a notable mention to Miss Marple. This is The Murder at the Vicarage, and whereas I've been reading Poirot out of order, I'm trying to read Miss Marple books in order. So Miss Marple, I love her. She's my girl. I aspire to be Miss Marple when I grow older. She is living in a village on her own. She's a spinster and she knows everything that's going on in this village, and a murder takes place, and of course she gets involved, and her character advocates for using feminine intuition to solve a crime or a murder. The thing that surprises me about the Miss Marple books is that she isn't actually super present on the page. She's not the one telling the story. We don't follow her closely during the narrative. She just sort of gets involved. She just turns up, gets roped in, and pops up throughout the book. So I don't know if I love that. I would like whole novels entirely following her and her life. I want to know everything about her life. I do think that the series will develop as the books go on, and that I will find ones I like and ones I don't like as much, because so far the actual crimes and the murders themselves haven't been my favourite, but I still love them and really enjoy them, so that's quite complicated. Like, I love these books, but I also want a lot more from them, but I'd still highly recommend them. They're a lot of fun. And Miss Marple is such an icon. Like, she is iconic. So would highly recommend, but be aware that if you're expecting loads of Miss Marple, you're not going to get her. She's just a woman who turns up when she wants to, and we are all at her whim. 2023 was also the year that I finished off my rereading of Jane Austen, because I'm working on a book project at the moment which retells Jane Austen in the modern age, which I'm loving so much. So I reread Northanger Abbey and Persuasion this year. I loved both of them. I think I loved Persuasion even more than I did the first time around, but I also read Emma for the first time ever, and I am obsessed. I love this book so much. I'd watched an adaptation previously, but I'd never actually read the whole book. I just want to sort of hug this book because it's become such a favourite of mine. I don't know which Jane Austen book is my favourite because I love them all in very different ways, but there's something so special about Emma. So Emma is about Emma Woodhouse, who is a meddling matchmaker. She's obsessed with this idea of putting people together and arranging suitable marriages for them, but is also very insistent that she is not going to get married herself. If Emma was in the modern day, I would very much call it a situationship situation, because Emma then develops this crush on a man called Frank Churchill, who really is the worst. Not really the worst in terms of Jane Austen, but I mean, I wouldn't recommend falling in love with him, Emma. So she might be a matchmaker, but Emma really doesn't have any clue about love or the practicalities of it. We also have Mr. Knightley, who I love, who gets a lot of criticism because he's said to sort of change Emma, but I think he just sort of gently guides her, and I think the dynamic is one we don't really understand as much in the 21st century because there's quite a different age dynamic there, which doesn't always translate perfectly. And we can't talk about Jane Austen without mentioning her humour. I feel like in rereading Jane Austen so specifically this year and reading so many of her books, I feel like she's become a real friend, and I hadn't really felt that way about her books. I've always loved Jane Austen, but getting to spend the time with her and going to visit her house, for example, and see the things that she lived with and learn more about her as a person, it's given me a much greater appreciation for her as a writer, for her as a person, and I feel like she's been such a companion to me this year. I'm so happy that I read Emma. I actually want to reread it soon because it's a story that's come to mean a lot to me, and Emma as a character has come to mean a lot to me. I feel very protective of her, so I'm so happy that I read it. I wish I'd read it years ago, but I wasn't meant to read it years ago. I needed it at this point in my life. Outside of classics, a new to me author that I didn't discover this year because she's not an author you can discover. She has been very well discovered by many people, but an author that was new to me this year that I read was Taylor Jenkins Reid. So I read Daisy Jones and the Six and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and I loved both of these. What I love about these books is that they feel very real. Like, I, after reading them, feel like Daisy Jones and the Six are a real band that I know and have listened to. I feel like Evelyn Hugo is a real Hollywood movie star. These are books that I have to remind myself aren't real. They are fictional. So what Taylor Jenkins Reid is really known for is her unusual narrative style, particularly in many of her most recent novels. So she really plays around with structure and form. Daisy Jones and the Six, for example, is written in the style of a documentary or interview series with a fictional band, a little bit like Fleetwood Mac. There is romance, there is intrigue, there are all these secrets that you're discovering. The narration is often very unreliable because of that. So it was so engaging. I really did feel like I engaged with the reading experience because of that. And like I said earlier about Agatha Christie, I also found the books incredibly readable. I raced through them at a time when I didn't really feel like reading, but I know when I read a Taylor Jenkins Reid that I'm not going to be able to put them down, and those are the books I've gravitated towards this year. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is a book that I've bought as a present since I've recommended to people in my life because I think that it's one that you can enjoy across generations. It's about the eponymous Evelyn Hugo, who is an old Hollywood star who's been very, very well known during her career, and at the beginning of the novel is in her old age and wants to have her story told for the first time. And again, what I really love about it is that the narration often is unreliable. You don't always like the characters or their motivations or what they do, but that's why it's so engaging, and that's why you can't put it down, because you love to hate it, you hate to love it. It's a book that is all about humanity, and that's what I love as a reader. I love the complexity. In children's and YA, I had one highlight from each. So my favourite children's book of the year was Like a Charm by Elle McNicoll. This is set in a magical Edinburgh where our main character, Ramya, who is dyspraxic, just like myself, which was very relatable, she learns that she can see beyond the glamour, and so she doesn't just see the real world, but this magical world runs alongside it. And I loved how original the setting of Edinburgh felt. You can tell that Elle loves it so much and knows so much about it, because you get things like Greyfriars Bobby running off his plinth and going up the street. I loved little details like that. And I also loved the family dynamic in this and how it's often very complex, but also speaks so loudly about neurodiversity and being the black sheep of the family, and all things that felt very relatable to a neurodivergent person, but I think would also be very interesting to read if you were neurotypical. This isn't just a book for children. It may be a children's book, but it can also be enjoyed if you're a teenager, if you're an adult. Elle's writing is universal and is definitely worth a read. More recently, I read Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. This is her YA debut, and I think you can tell that she has come from writing romance into YA, because I felt like it sort of crossed the boundaries of YA. It can read as a crossover. It's not as detailed or graphic sexually as her romance books are, but I definitely think that when you read this alongside some UK YA, for example, or other YA books, she's just able to do a little bit more than I think other authors would get away with. And I actually liked that. I don't want it from every YA book I read, but it really made me think about my own YA writing and the boundaries that can be pushed and crossed and the things that I enjoy reading in my YA. I would describe this as what would happen if YA met The Queen's Gambit, because it is a chess romance. Our main character is a bit of a chess prodigy. She hasn't played chess for years, but she's talked into entering this competition where she just happens to beat the world-leading teenage chess champion, who is of course our love interest. I really loved how much time and attention was given to their relationship, but also how much time and attention was given to the non-romantic relationships in this book, how it felt very realistic and how she wasn't the most likeable of YA protagonists, but I don't think every character should be likeable, and that was why I liked her, because she felt human. She made mistakes. There were things that she definitely could have done better, but that's because teenagerhood is messy, and I like characters who are allowed to be messy and are allowed to be themselves and explore who they are as people. And I also just loved the romance. I was obsessed with it. I couldn't put it down because I was just like, I want more. I want them to be together. Like, when are they going to be together? Moving on now from YA romance to adult romance, which is definitely like my obsession outside of classics. I love adult romance and I'm so into it as a category, as a genre. I just love it and I love thinking about it, and it's what I want to write. It's everything to me. So something of a tradition now is for me to read the new Emily Henry book when it comes out every year. I buy it straight away. I read it the same day it comes out. Like, I know that I'm gonna love the book regardless of what it's about. So this year's Emily Henry release was Happy Place, and I loved this because it's about a couple who have been together for a long time but have broken up at the beginning of the novel, and then they get invited to spend time at their friend's house. It's this huge big thing, but they have to pretend that they're still together. That's just like my catnip trope. I love sort of fake dating, fake romance, and I love the inverse of that, where they have been in a relationship, they're no longer, but they have to fake it. I just love finding an author that I know I can rely on to deliver a good, interesting book that I'm going to race through. I'm going to read it so quickly and then regret it because I wish that I'd been reading it for longer because I enjoyed it so much. And of course, it's the end of the year. I'm already looking forward to the next Emily Henry release and doing it all over again. Another obsession of mine this year was with Becca Max books. I don't know anything about ice hockey, let me put it out there. It's not something that is a really big thing in the UK. It's not something that I've ever professed an interest in, but I love an ice hockey romance, and this series was, I just read all of them very quickly. They have just been released, so they were self-published. They have now been traditionally released with these lovely, beautiful covers. So we have Consider Me, Play With Me, and Unravel Me, and I loved them all. And the thing I love about a romance, and the thing that sort of ties up my favourite romance books, is a community or a group of people, like a family or found family, who you feel like you could self-insert and be part of that group because you know them so well. So we really sort of have an established world around this one hockey team, and I loved that I knew so much about them, that I sort of knew all their inside joke, that I can sort of imagine my own scenarios based on the book. Like, I feel like I could write fan fiction on it. That's what I want out of a good romance, and I definitely felt like I got it with this. I think Consider Me was probably my favourite, followed by Play With Me and then Unravel Me, but I'm so looking forward to the next books in the series. Like, I'm part of the reader group on Facebook. I love hearing other people talk about them. I love just being immersed in this world, and so many people love these, and for good reason. I'd recommend these if you like hockey or sports romances, if you like love interests who get super obsessive and just all they can think about is the heroine, and also if you like the found family trope, because I think this series does that really well. I also want to give a special mention to a book that isn't out yet. It is a 2024 release that I was very lucky to get to read early. This is Under Your Spell by Laura Wood, and Laura is not just one of my favourite authors, but one of my favourite people in life. I got to hang out with her earlier this year before the book had sold, and so she told me all about it. I got a personal pitch and I fell in love with it then. And then I read it and it's all I've been able to think about. This is going to be your romance obsession in 2024. So Under Your Spell is a celebrity romance. Our main character is the daughter of a rock star. She's grown up in this sort of celebrity adjacent world, but she's not really in it herself. And our love interest is a singer who has to write his next album. And so they end up going away to this remote part of the country where they are in a house together, and she's supervising him and reporting back on him as he is supposedly writing his next album. They're stuck in a house together. It's my favourite thing, and what I loved about this was how much time it gave to developing both of them as characters, but also we get to see their relationship dynamic before they even know it themselves. So there's so much time and attention given to them, their romance. It just felt so complete, so whole as a book. And even though it is a contemporary book, it felt incredibly magical. It was everything I wanted from a romance. I really do think everybody is going to be obsessed with this book next year. I so hope that readers love it as much as I did, because it's just a complete winner of a book. It was everything I could have hoped for and more. So that was my 2023 in books. I didn't read a lot, but the books I did read, I couldn't stop thinking about. I'm actually really happy with my reading year. When I look at it all and feel excited again, just as I felt excited when I was reading these books, it makes it all feel completely worth it. Thank you so much for all your support for my videos and for me this year. I know I haven't been around a lot, but I hope to see a lot more of you in 2024. Let me know in the comments what your favourite books of the year were, and also let me know what Agatha Christie book I should read next, because it's going to be a lot of Agatha Christie in my future, I just know it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you soon. Happy reading!